I decided to start just on a really short series that'll end next week based on the last passage we talked on last week. And we finished Mark chapter 8, and we'll be going into Mark chapter 9 in 2 weeks. But I felt we needed to explore this just a little bit farther, what Jesus said when he encouraged his disciples with these words. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? You know, those verses are so prevalent. People who are not Christians can even recite those. And I was listening to a podcast last night between a filmmaker and a television producer. And they were talking about the merits of an old film called Citizen Kane. Some of you may have seen it. And they said that whole movie was about a man who gained the whole world and lost his very soul. And these are two Jewish men talking about a film and referring to the Christian scriptures. And it's exactly it. It's so tempting and it's so easy to get our eyes on what we see and to get our hands on what we see and forget about the eternal rewards when we give up our lives for Jesus here on this earth. And so Jesus told his disciples that right after he said to them that his mission was he was going to go suffer, he was going to die, and he was going to be buried and rise again. And not only was he going to do that, the call for every Christian is that we indeed, for his sake, will suffer, and we are to die to ourselves. We're to be living sacrifices, though. We don't just kill ourselves. That isn't the point. The point is we deny ourselves, which sometimes very much feels like we're dying, indeed, when we give up our lives for the sake of the gospel and for the sake of others. And to take up the cross is to die to yourself and be willing to pay any price for Jesus' sake. And here's the question. This begs the question. Are you willing to give up anything and everything for the sake of Christ if he called you to do so? Because that is the call. And I don't know what he's called you to or what he will call you to. But can you say, regardless of what he says to give up, would you be willing to do it? And if you are, then you understand the principle of denying yourself. Now, when he asked the rich young ruler to give up everything he had and give it to the poor, that was for him. We're not all called to do that, but some are. My friend Steve Epp, who visited us a year ago, he is called, along with his wife, to live in a little teeny pull-along trailer and walk literally across in various states just as a witness for Jesus. You know, as much as that might be a great opportunity for exercise, I am glad I am not called to do that, to carry a big wooden cross across the states to witness for Jesus. But no, we have other crosses to bear, don't we? Other crosses to bear, and are we willing to carry those? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I love this quote. I'm going to say it again. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. That is the Christian message. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer indeed died as a martyr in World War II. He had the ill-fated plan. He thought that God wanted he and a group of people to plot to kill Hitler. Instead, Hitler's men found out about this plot, and he ended up going to the gallows, and along with the other people who did that. One pastor described it this way: we take up our cross when we choose the narrow way over the way of the world, regardless of the cost. We take up our cross when we live out biblical ethics in our personal lives and in our business relationships, regardless of the cost. We take up our cross when we are willing to suffer any attack for Jesus' sake. And this is not optional if you are a believer. Jesus isn't just part of your life. Jesus is your life. You will never truly live until you walk down death row with Jesus. You cannot be resurrected to this new life unless you die to yourself. Now, the rest of the teaching from last week was very practical. I gave specific examples of how we are to die to ourselves and lose our lives for Jesus, from loving your enemies and blessing those who curse you, which we all know is very easy to do, isn't it? Loving our enemies and blessing those who curse us. Oh, how easy that is. No. Because even if you do that, then you have to deal with the heart. Or submitting to the government, or your boss, and submitting to each other, and so on and so on. To live the truly Christian life is to live the hardest life of all. It demands that we die to ourselves so others may be blessed and Jesus glorified. There is a benefit to this. It's for us to die to ourselves. It means somebody else gets to be blessed. Somebody else gets to see Jesus in us. Somebody else gets the benefits of somebody who is a believer, who gives of themselves so they can be exalted, so they can be honored, so Christ can be exalted and honored. I also said that the Christian life included all the one another's of the Bible. And I made a mistake last week. I said there's 100 one another's in the Bible, and indeed there are, but those one another's aren't all commands. Some of those, as I looked, I went through every one this week to double check my information, and some of those are, he said one to another this, or there were just phrases. There are actually 44 commands of one another. 4 are commands from Jesus: to love one another, and to wash one another's feet. The other 40 are spread throughout the epistles, and the majority have the common theme of this: loving one another. All the commands are about getting along with one another in the church. Isn't that hilarious? We're commanded 44 times to love one another in the church. Do you find that to be kind of odd? Why would God command that? Because, this is funny to say, or sad, because the church can be the most difficult of all places to love one another. Isn't that interesting? I mean, you hear about church splits and schisms. You know, I met with the Ministerial Alliance last Wednesday, and Pastor Lee has a prayer that he would be able to stay here and that God would give him wisdom. Why? Because the Methodist Church isn't the Methodist Church that was founded by John Wesley several hundred years ago. They're now facing a great challenge, and they were told at their convention that they just need to accept what's going on. You know what's going on, right? Homosexual marriage and ordaining of lesbian and gay pastors, and all the way down the line. And Lee Romero loves the Lord and knows His Word, and he's struggling. So we're praying for wisdom for him. But those are schisms. There are schisms within denominations, that is splits, and there are church splits within churches over the color of carpeting, or the color of the chairs, or the painting of the building. Oh, there's no end to the silly things that people can get upset over. Not only that, we all come from different backgrounds and work styles and beliefs and political leanings. And my political leanings as a conservative may be different than your political leaning as a conservative, or you may not be a conservative at all. It doesn't matter. We have one common bond, and that is Jesus. And that belief in Jesus is what should guide our thinking. No one should divide on politics. No one should divide on how they're parenting, because we're free in Christ to live to His glory. And God may tell your family to live differently than how He tells our family and your family. But we get along because of Jesus Christ. We not only get along, we what? Love one another. Love one another. The family that you are in right now, this body of believers called Community Church of the Hills, is the family you will be with for eternity. So you better get used to it and get along and love for eternity. And this is a unique family with each member coming from all different walks of life. We're like a chef's salad at the country cupboard. There are people who will rub us the wrong way, even irritate us. Yet we aren't just called to tolerate, put up with, or just do the best we can with these other Christians. We are called, we are exhorted, we are commanded to do this: love one another deeply from the heart. So now he takes it a step further. It's not only just love one another, that's hard enough, but love one another deeply. Paul writes in Romans that love must be sincere. Oh my golly, how easy is all of this? We are to die to ourselves so that we may be a blessing to fellow believers. We also have the responsibility to help others do the same. What do I mean by that? We get involved. When we see somebody involved in something they shouldn't be, or acting in a certain way they ought not to be, we lovingly take those people aside. I go to a prayer group on occasion where two people won't look at me and won't talk to me. I've talked to them to no avail. And it almost makes me not want to come to this prayer group because of that. You know the feeling, right? When you're not liked, you don't want to go. But I've challenged myself to face difficult challenges and go through it anyway with courage and do it anyway. But my hope is that other people will recognize the situation and they will deal with these two people as well and talk to them lovingly and graciously and help us come together because there's been, some division. And if I wait any longer, then I'm going to tell a few people to please get involved. That's my responsibility. It's my responsibility. We're to live and love one another, and we're to live in harmony. We have a responsibility to prod our sisters and brothers to also love one another deeply, encouraging them to remain faithful by staying in and contributing to the family. Hebrews 10:23 and 25 says this, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." You see this not giving up meeting together? Golly, what competes on Sunday morning? Name it. You know what competes for Sunday morning church service? Everything. 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 Thank you for coming today, though you worked all night in Austin. And you had the choice to take a nap, right? But you came to church. And there's baseball, and there's soccer, and there's, then there's the first weekend of November. I'm telling you, I thought football was big in Texas until I came to the hill country. I did not realize deer hunting makes football look like soccer. Everything competes with the Sunday morning service. The time set aside to worship the Lord, to honor Him, to give of ourselves, to get to know one another. I love our intervening time that we have after worship, where everyone's talking and fellowshipping. I love that because many of you have come from churches where right after all the worship, everyone sits down, they stand up, shake hands, and sit down again. No, this is great. It's great. I love that. And I love when you ignore the piano when Beverly tries to get you to sit down. Because you're talking and you're fellowshipping and you're loving one another. Today, Beverly tried 2 times. That was awesome. This is why we have small groups and women's studies and fellowship events, so that the more we spend with each other, the more we love one another. These are all calculated so that we can get to know and appreciate our differences. And this is why Chris had it on his heart to play the music, because we don't want those who are raised in another tradition to feel left out. We want you to be able to sing along the old hymns of the faith. And that's why Beverly has been the constant here, playing the old hymns of the faith, which I always want to introduce a new generation to these old hymns. And so the other generations can know, yes, we love those old songs too, because they glorify Christ. We want everybody to not only get along, but to love. Now, the writer of the book of Hebrews was challenging his readers to stay steadfast in the faith, because when things are difficult, a trial goes on too long, circumstances don't change, or things actually get worse, we have a tendency to look back to the old life. Oh, things were better back then. The Israelites looked back too. They wanted to go back where they were fed leeks and onions. These are all things that came out of the ground, but God rescued them from 400 years of slavery. Every one of us who have been saved, we've been rescued from slavery to sin. And we want to go back to that life? No. When we do that, then we begin to doubt God and His promises. Those who begin to waver in their faith are in danger of falling away then. That's why we got to continually. I go through a roll call after service every night. I go look, see who was here, who wasn't there. And after 2 weeks, you get a call. Not nagging you, not rebuking you, not being mean, because I care. The only people who don't get the call is Tom and Becky, because they live in Houston. All right? But you get 4 weeks. 4 weeks, you get a call. But I do that because I care, and I want to see who's there. I don't want to just say, oh, they all came, and they all left, and that's it, my job's done. No, I want to pray for your needs, and I want to think about how we can continue to press on and hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. And that's what the verse says. For he who promised is faithful. He is faithful to do what he promised, to keep you strong to the end. How does he keep us strong to the end? What means does God use to ensure that we will continue walking with him? What do you think? How do we do that? How do we continue to walk to the end? What do you think? Who wants to hazard a guess? What means has he used to keep us walking? Christian community. Christian community. The fellowship of believers. People who are faithful to be living representatives of Christ himself. People willing to give and love and serve and offer encouragement and comfort or a well-timed rebuke. Hebrews 10:24 says, and let us consider how we may spur one another on to love and good deeds. The English word used here for spur, listen to this, usually has the meaning of irritation or exasperation in the original language. So guess what I am paid to do? I am paid to irritate and exasperate you. But not just with me and my personality, but to say, hey, how are you doing in the Lord? Are you walking with him? Hey, I noticed you may be off a little here. But not just me, guess who else? Every one of us in here. No, if I do it, then you all have a reason to blame the pastor. No, you all should get blamed. Share the blame equally. Get involved. I'm going to be talking to the people in that prayer group and asking them to get involved because I can handle this. But the other two may not even be aware of what spiritual damage they are encountering. You know what I mean? They're not aware. It's easy for us to ignore somebody when we don't like them, or to leave, or to quit. It's easy. Don't quit. Stay with it. Hey, if I'm irritating you too much, talk to me. You don't have to bring 2 or 3 others either. Just come. I'm not going to bite you. Okay? To spur one another on to love and good deeds in a Christian community is to not be afraid to get involved in each other's lives. It may be irritating. It may be exasperating to someone, but we need to do it in humility, graciously, considerately, and insistently. The love we want to spur people on to, remember, is agape love. That's God's love. Love that seeks another's highest welfare. Are you tracking with me? You see the high bar? We really need to be involved in people's lives, even if you're a loner. Even if you like being alone and being by yourself and living your life as a hermit in public, it doesn't matter. This is what we are all called to do. This is love in action, love that does things, good things for family members. Unfortunately, in this world, we're conditioned to be incredibly self-focused, self-centered, and self-satisfied, aren't we? It's easier to turn up the volume of our iPhones or Androids, draw the curtains, roll up the windows, sneak out early, or sit in the dark alone instead of getting involved with others because we're too concerned with ourselves. But I won't let that happen, and our elders won't let it happen. And please, y'all, don't let it happen. Pete and Dan were walking in the woods one day when suddenly they stumbled upon a large grizzly bear and her 2 cubs. The 2 started to run away when all of a sudden one of them stopped. What are you stopping for? Asked Pete. Don't you know the grizzly bear is right behind us? I'm tying my shoes so I can run faster, said Dan. Well, Pete laughed nervously. What? You think you'll outrun the grizzly? I don't have to outrun the grizzly, said Dan. I just have to outrun you. In our selfish society, how often do we act like that friend to each other, more concerned about ourselves? I'm afraid that at times we have learned to turn the other cheek only to avoid noticing the personal issues that need addressing in another Christian's life. Practically, how do we spur one another on to love and good deeds? How do we do that practically? Well, we can start with those one another's of the New Testament and begin practicing on people in our church. I'm not going to go through all 44 of them. So I gave you a Chinese menu to look at. Take a look at your notes. There's a Chinese menu to look at. To start, you pick 1 from column A, 1 from column B, and 1 from column C. Don't read that menu because that's actually in Chinese. I did give you some Chinese characters. What do you think those Chinese characters are? What do you think they stand for? One another's. Okay? Choose one from column A as your start, column B, column C, and you only get one dessert. Only one. All right? You may add more as your spiritual appetite increases, but again, you can only have one dessert. So let's look at column A. Romans 12:10. Be devoted to one another in love. You can start there. Be devoted to one another. Devoted indicates a family tie. We are to love other Christians with the same love we have for our flesh and blood family. Romans 12:10b, honor one another above yourselves. This means that we show genuine appreciation and admiration for each other. Genuine. We are more sensitive about showing respect and acknowledging one another's accomplishments. We aren't jealous or envious. When we do this, we are truly maturing in our faith. To honor one another is to honor God because Christ lives in the other believer. You got that? When was the last time you honored somebody above yourself, right? That's tough to do. That's tough to do. Romans 14:13, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Oh, it's easy to pass judgment, isn't it? Without knowing the whole situation, we only have this much information on a person, and we want to be quick to judgment, quick to rebuke them. No, we need to be slow in that. We need to consider and get to know those people. John Wesley told of a man he had little respect for because he considered him to be miserly and covetous. One day, when this person contributed only a small gift to a worthy charity, Wesley, my hero, openly criticized him. After the incident, the man went to Wesley privately and told him he had been living on parsnips and water for several weeks. He explained that before his conversion, he had run up many bills. Now, by skimping on everything and buying nothing for himself, he was paying off the creditors one by one. He said, Christ has made me an honest man, and so with all these debts to pay, I can only give a few offerings above my tithe. I must settle up with my worldly neighbors and show them what the grace of God can do in the heart of a man who was once dishonest. You know what Wesley did when he heard that? He apologized and asked for his forgiveness. He didn't have the whole story, and he was quick to make judgments on this man. Romans 15:17, accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. That's the bottom line. We just accept one another for where they're at. We are starting an NA program here. You know what NA is? Narcotics Anonymous. We're going to be having that on a Wednesday night. It's going to be in the youth group. Not in the youth group. That would be probably bad choices. It'll be in the youth room. And the doors will be locked here so they can't come into the sanctuary. But the person who has this vision is a law enforcement officer and a park ranger. So she's got cred. And she's been clean for almost 30 years. And my heart, coming from my background, and you know now there's an opioid epidemic, right? You're all familiar with the opioid epidemic? And you know, Johnson City is a place where a lot of these people live. This is a place that they can find hope in their 12-step program, giving them a step or two or three to on their way to Christ. She goes to First Baptist Church, and Keyburn gave permission for her to have it here. She wants to have it here because we're anonymous. We're kind of tucked away. They'll be coming in through the back entrance, but we're to accept one another. Some of these people, I hope, will come to Christ and end up coming here. And let's be welcoming and loving and gracious, because they're going to be on the beginning of a path. And that's what we do as Christians, don't we? We minister and we love, and we bring healing and hope to them. Accept one another, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. A little girl once prayed, Lord, make the bad people good and the good people nice. You know, sometimes the church is a lot like Noah's Ark. If it weren't for the storm outside, we couldn't stand the stink inside, right? But we come. In the book, The Covenant Home Altar, the author wrote, when I was growing up, my mom was deeply involved with the various activities I participated in. She would often tell me, make sure Heather feels included, or ask Julie to be your partner, or invite Kristen to sit with you and your friends. I sometimes dreaded hearing those words. What if I just wanted to be with my friends? Why should I have to make sure that other people were having fun? And this shouldn't be the attitude of our church. Mom had the right perspective. So please keep an eye open for people who are coming in new, different walks of life, and welcome, and you do. And you do. This is just a reminder. It's just a reminder to keep on doing what you're doing because you're doing a great job. Beverly, we're going to shoot for 3 tries at the piano to get people to sit back down, okay? Dietrich Bonhoeffer again wrote, the exclusion of the weak and the insignificant, the useless people from a Christian community may actually mean the exclusion of Christ. Think about that. Okay, here's the dessert item. Greet one another with a holy kiss. That is, wait. Young single men, wait. That means give a warm greeting or a hearty handshake all around. Okay? That's your dessert item. Okay, column B. Now, column B, these items are a bit costlier. Okay? Galatians 5:13, serve one another humbly in love. Ephesians 4:2, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Oh my golly. Does anybody know what completely humble means? Neither do I. When you know what it means, you ain't got it. Nobody knows what to be completely humble is. One man wrote, humility is low-mindedness, an attitude that one is not too good to serve. Humility is that grace that when you know you have it, you have lost it. Humility means putting Christ first, others second, and self last. Got it? There you go. Humility means putting Christ first, others second, and self last. Andrew Murray said, the humble person is not one who thinks lowly of himself. He simply does not think of himself at all. You know, in ancient Greece, that they had no word for humble or humility. They didn't have that word. There's no such thing. Kind of like America, huh? Does anyone ever use that word anymore? A missionary to India once said that if I were to pick out 2 phrases necessary for spiritual growth, I would pick out these. I don't know, and I am sorry. And both phrases are the evidences of deep humility. Ephesians 4:32, be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. You got that? Kind and compassionate, forgiving, because Christ did the same for us. You know how I like to remember this verse? Whenever you buy something in Austin, and it's $3.99, with tax, it'll be $4.32. So for years and years and years, because Austin has the same tax rate as LA, I would see, Ephesians 4:32, and it was a reminder every time that it rung up what I needed to do. Be compassionate, kind, forgiving. Despite his busy schedule during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln often visited the hospitals to cheer the wounded. On one occasion, he saw a young man who was near death. Is there anything I can do for you? Asked the compassionate president. Please write a letter to my mother, came the reply. Unrecognized by the soldier, the chief executive sat down and wrote as the youth told him what to say. The letter read, my dearest mother, I was badly hurt while doing my duty, and I won't recover. Don't sorrow too much for me. May God bless you and Father. Kiss Mary and John for me. The young man was too weak to go on, so Lincoln signed the letter for him and then added the postscript, written for your son by Abraham Lincoln. Asking to see the note, the soldier was astonished to discover who had shown him such kindness. Are you really our president, he asked. Yes, was the quiet answer. Now, is there anything else I can do? The lad feebly replied, will you please hold my hand? I think it would help to see me through to the end. The tall, gaunt president granted his request, offering warm words of encouragement until the young soldier passed away. That's kind and compassionate, isn't it? My pastor of the church I went to for nearly 25 years, there's a lot of things I remember about him, but the one thing I remember about my pastor was this. We were having a singles leadership meeting. I was the singles pastor, and we were having a leadership in another building, in another room, up the top of the stairs. And we had that meeting during our Saturday night service. We had 4 services. And we were in the middle of the meeting, and pastor came up with another man, opened the door for him and showed him in, and then he left. Like, what was that about? Well, Marty didn't know where our meeting was at, and our pastor, who was greeting at the top of the stairs before service, Actually took him all the way through the sanctuary, down the stairs, up the stairs, and to the other building, and into the room, and showed him the way. And that's the one memory I have that sticks out most about my pastor. He didn't have to do that. He could have had somebody else taking Marty over, but he took him over. Just a lowly single. But he did it. And so I'm appreciative of what Abraham Lincoln did and what we're called to do. Ephesians 5:18-19, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. What does that mean? What does that mean? When was the last time someone sang a song of the Spirit to you to encourage your heart? Tom, you're feeling down. Oh, I'm not supposed to get off the stage, right? Tough. Tom, you're feeling down. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. I'll pray for you instead. But to be ready to offer a word of encouragement like that through a psalm or a hymn or a spiritual song. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. One another. Here's the dessert item. Greet one another with a kiss of love. Single guys, let me explain what that means. J. Vernon McGee said, a kiss to a young girl is hope. To a married woman is faith. But to an old maid is charity. In our country and culture, I think we had better just use the handshake as the means of Christian greeting, okay? So that's what it means. Give a warm handshake. Lastly, column C. Now, these are spicier dishes. 1 Thessalonians 5:11, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing, just as in fact y'all are doing. Puritan Thomas Watson said, in other races, many times one hinders another, but in the race to heaven, one Christian helps another. Isn't that great? In a race, you're trying to beat the other guy, but no, not in the Christian race. We're helping each other to get across the finish line. It was only a sunny smile and little it cost in the giving, but it scattered the night like morning light and made the day worth living. Just a word of encouragement can help somebody through. 1 Peter 3:8, finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Be like-minded, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, humble. You know, there are two types of people in the world. Someone once said this, those who come into a room and say, here I am, and those who come in and say, ah, there you are. How different are those two approaches? One says, look at me, I need attention. The other says, tell me about yourself. One says, I'm important. The other says, you are important. One says, the world revolves around me. The other says, I'm here to serve you. Wouldn't it be great to be known as that second kind of person, someone others love to have around? Someone who displays the love of Christ openly and unashamedly? Are you getting the picture here about what love is? I know I'm telling a whole lot. There's a lot of verses. That's why you can go look at them on your own on that Chinese menu, and you can decide what you want to do. How about this one? Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Some folks make you feel at home. Others make you wish you were. That's not hospitality. A Swahili proverb says, treat your guest as a guest for 2 days. On the third day, give him a hoe. And Benjamin Franklin said, fish and visitors smell in 3 days. I don't think they had the gift of hospitality. All right, and here's your dessert item. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Young men, what does that mean? Young single men? You know, this is what makes preaching worthwhile. But because I'm gracious, compassionate, kind, and forgiving, I will say to you, it means this. Arm handshake. What does it mean? Bearing with one another in love. By practicing these one another's, we can move out of selfishness to selflessness. By spurring one another on to these examples of love and good deeds, we help others to hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. So there's a payoff here. Aunt Diane made frequent trips to the Johnson City post office, and one day she encountered a long line of people who were waiting for service at the counter. She only needed stamps, so a helpful customer asked, why don't you go to the stamp machine? You can get all the stamps you need and you won't have to stand in line. Aunt Diane said, I know, but the machine can't ask me about my arthritis. People need human contact. You can acquire everything you want in solitude except character. We all grow in Christian community by spurring one another on, no matter how inconvenient or uncomfortable. This is how we deny ourselves for Jesus' sake, humbling ourselves, getting involved, and taking loving action toward one another. This is how we show true love for fellow followers of Jesus. So I'll conclude with one verse, two verses from Jesus. A new command I give you: love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Let's pray.